Mm. All right, welcome back. So you decided to click. I knew you would. All right, so what's the question? I have a Bush question for you guys. Cool. Okay.
Just
Clip
think.
me. All right, what is your question, sir? This is coming from Harry.
Gee, in 3 months, will we get to not have to answer Bush questions anymore?
Mm. I
Nah.
always thought that the funny jokes that people, comedians and stuff, could have come up with Bush and Dick, and never did.
Well,
You know?
it was all family shows. Some of them did go there, but
Yeah, but not enough. I mean, you could have really, really. I mean, if I could stomach it, I would pay porno stars to make a movie called Dick and Bush and have it like the president and them having like their mistresses in and stuff. And every once in a while, Dick Cheney saying to George Bush, "All right, buddy, bend over. It's time."
yeah. Do I give him credit? I,
Do you give
not so
Bush
much.
credit for
No.
no Al Qaeda attacks on America soil in 7 years? Absolutely not,
Do we
because
give Clinton credit for all the years that there
that
weren't
he
any
stopped any
attacks?
9/11 from happening.
There was a Millennium Bomber. That's the only one, or that guy that was going to go down across the border from
Yeah, that was
Canada
from
that got
Canada up in
caught.
Vancouver,
Um,
Washington, I believe, border.
is there any evidence that Al Qaeda made any attempts? Let's ask that.
Yeah, is there any evidence that Al Qaeda made any attempts? Yes, of course so, because after 9/11 they hit Spain, they hit the UK.
Yes, but any attempts on American
Well,
soil?
on American soil, no, but I've always maintained they just got lucky. I've always maintained they got lucky. That ordinarily, that in today's world, that wouldn't happen, and any president would have implemented those safeguards after 9/11. And do I think 9/11 would have happened regardless of who was in office? Yes, probably.
Yeah.
I don't think Clinton or Bush or any one individual is at fault for not stopping 9/11. Complete complacency. Complete complacency.
Even if they'd, looked at the issue, nobody ever really expected a multi-plane targeted set of suicide bombers in the way that that went down. I mean, even if people discuss, I mean, the whole air traffic control system was just not really geared to deal with that.
Well,
And,
and let's be honest here. They did this with some box cutters. They didn't have guns, they didn't have bombs. They were guys who had passports getting on, and so they had the equivalent of like an X-Acto knife,
yeah, and,
which nobody would have given any second thought to back pre 9/11.
oh, remember the stuff you used to be able to bring? I mean,
Yeah, remember the things you used to be able to bring
you know,
in
you,
your carry-on?
you could pretty much pack a loaded handgun on in some of the airlines, damn
Yeah,
near.
yeah, some allowed you for sure. So, but I think any president would have implemented those restrictions on airlines after 9/11.
I mean, I think there was certainly some intelligence breakdown where they had some shots at maybe stopping or
I'll
being
be
more
right back.
aware of
Go ahead.
what was going down. But to lay that at the foot of the president, I think isn't necessarily fair. And to think that, that Bush personally has done anything that stopped a follow-up attack that, there really isn't any evidence that they've planned. And that's always been the thing for me with 9/11. I mean, if Al Qaeda does something else or wants to do something else, they've almost got to up the ante. You don't do something huge and then follow it up with blowing up a 7-Eleven at the mini mall, because people will take that as being, you're not capable of pulling off the big caper. So they almost feel obligated to at least match or do something huge if they're going to try another attack. And I think, that they, the invasion into Afghanistan, and we took out a lot of Al Qaeda. They have reconstituted and this and that, but as far as them trying to come up with something that's on an equally grand scale, I don't think they've really tried it yet, thankfully. And I hope we over the next few years can finally get some of those bastards and make sure it never happens. Because right now, from all accounts, they're just getting stronger where they are, and another attack will come. Unfortunately, you can count on it. Right, exactly. There's been lots of attacks by Al Qaeda. I mean, a lot of that, they talk about in Iraq or whatnot. But the fact that they haven't been on American soil, look, here's a question. Have they tried? I mean, if they haven't tried, is that something you personally pat the president on the back for, or did they take the closer targets of opportunity, especially after they got pushed out of Afghanistan and their issue in regaining sort of a sovereign country of their own in Afghanistan is a more pressing issue to them, or what they were dealing with in Iraq. Stating any sort of number of that, I mean, arguably there was all sorts of terrorist attacks around the world before 9/11, and they weren't on American soil either. So I don't see where that has bearing.
And I do believe that that the Sunni awakening in Iraq happened before the surge, and there's actual timeline history that you can go back and see that the Sunni awakening was happening before the surge happened. Okay, and so Al Qaeda, what did Al Qaeda do? They didn't get defeated in Iraq. They moved to Afghanistan. And have you looked at how bad things are in Afghanistan? Have you looked at how bad it is? It's bad. They're ambushing us at our own bases.
I mean, here, let me ask you a question.
So it's not that, George Bush, even if you want to believe that Iraq was the central battleground in the war on terrorism, according to George Bush, if it ever was, it isn't now. Afghanistan is, and it's pretty obvious.
Look, one of the this isn't an issue of being a Bush hater. You want to give Bush personal responsibility for foiling any attacks since on 9/11. Now, let's consider one of the things that's been a big topic of discussion over the last 4 years, which is illegal immigration and the fact that they haven't been able to stop the flood of people crossing the borders. If Al Qaeda had made a serious attempt against the U.S., do you honestly think they couldn't have got people across the Mexican border or somewhere across the Canadian border or got somebody in? And let's face it, the American government isn't responsible for how an Al Qaeda member or whatnot is going to get into Mexico or Canada. That's not the American government's job. That's the Canadian government's job, etc. So if Al Qaeda had wanted to bring in another large team, do something, and
they could have leaped off from Mexico or Canada.
The borders are still Swiss cheese.
The fact is, if you look back at it, it was perpetrated by the complacency of the airline companies in the United States of America.
Yeah, didn't want to put the money into an armored door.
They didn't come in from Canada or come up from Mexico. So it was a breakdown of our system, and I always remember hearing it a lot of the time because we really were, a lot of blame went towards Canada for the Millennium Bomber, and I think rightfully so. At least it got caught. But imagine how that would have turned out to be the Millennium Bomber had he gotten through and not got stopped by American Customs.
I mean, I'm just curious.
But leaving Canada going into the United States, or leaving the United States going into Canada, you deal with their border guards, not the other way around.
So, I mean, what evidence do you have that Al Qaeda has made any effort to try to do a terrorist attack
I'm
in the
not
United
convinced
States?
that they have, and I did actually just on my way back over here, Mike saying that once you do a 9/11, you can't pretty much. It's a sign of weakness if you do something like blow up a 7-Eleven, like he said. You've got to come back and you've got to do at least equal on par.
And
unless you can do that, then you just run on. Have you ever heard your reputation precedes you? So you run on that,
and that's
until you can do something more grandiose.
That is one of the things that's really worrying me with this current thing off of Somalia, where they're showing just how easy.
There's some wicked crap going down in Somalia there.
Yeah, where they're showing just how easy piracy can take place still. And can you imagine if Al Qaeda takes a look at this and says, what happens if we take a freighter full or pull a tanker full of compressed natural gas and get it into a port somewhere and set the sucker off? I mean, it is quite clear that the maritime system is as wide open right now as the airlines were 10 years ago.
And look how many look how many, not look how many they do, look at how many they don't. Crates coming into the United States